Actors, we've all got issues, so let's talk about them. You're listening to Actors with Issues, a self-help podcast for actors by actors. Hello, ladies, gents, and non-binary friends, and welcome back to another episode of Actors with Issues, the self-help podcast for actors by actors. Featuring special guests from TV, film, and Broadway, we take a deep dive into the world of entertainment and discuss what it means to be an actor today. I'm your host, Juan Ayala, and today I'm joined by an actor, director, and playwright you know and love from stage and screen. Over 250 episodes of television under his belt. Yes, we counted. And you know him as the villainous Eobard Thawne in the CW's The Flash and Arrowverse, DEA agent James Kuykendall in Narcos Mexico, roles in Will and Grace, The Alienist, Boardwalk Empire, and dozens of other series and films. Matthew Letscher is here. Matthew, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you. That makes me feel old, but very welcome. Thank you.
It's funny, whenever we bring up episode count, folks are always surprised. Like, oh
That's
wow, have I really done that many?
that is shocking. But great.
So, as we always like to sort of take a look back at our guest careers, I read that one of your earliest roles was in the play The Tropic Pickle, which was with the great Jeff Daniels Theater Company.
hmm
And what do you remember from those early years pursuing this career? And do you recall if there was sort of like a major turning point that it went from either hobby or just interest to this can be a full-fledged career?
Um, yeah, there's a those sort of twists have sort of come all along the way, not even just early on,
Mhm.
but when I was in college, and I was studying, I didn't know what, I knew I liked acting, I knew I loved doing theater, but I never really thought I'd make a living doing it. Um, I was fortunate enough to take a workshop with the great Uta Hagen. She used to do these national tours where she'd stop regionally for a couple of weeks, and you get to work with this acting teacher who was, the foundation for a lot of what's being done by actors in America. And so when I was 18, I got to do that workshop with her, and she totally changed my perspective on what the craft was, what it could be, and what I had to give in that area. And so it was after that workshop, the summer after my freshman year in college, I decided I was going to go back and get a degree in theater, and that this was what I had to do. I just knew that that was the thing I had to do. My experience with Jeff at the Purple Rose was very similar and very close to that, and it just made me realize the more I think about it, even back then, I knew how stupidly lucky I was to get that part in that play. The Tropical Pickle, which is this super fun farce, living room farce, and I got to know Jeff over the course of doing it, and he helped me get my first part in a movie, which was Gettysburg, a
Mhm.
movie he was doing at the time, and
Yeah.
that's for an actor that age coming right out of school to get that kind of break is stupid. So I look at those two things as very pivotal.
And I'm curious, we talk quite a bit about sort of like mentorship and whatnot on the show. Was there someone sort of along the way, or maybe it is Jeff in that sense, that you really looked up to and sort of helped guide you in your career? Or if not, how would having someone like that have affected you?
Again, another area where I have my cup overfloweth. I mean, Jeff has certainly been that for me over the
Mhm.
years, a mentor and a friend. He's the one that dared me to become a playwright and gave me my first idea for one and produced it at the Purple Rose. He's really helped me see the possibilities in a lot of things that I didn't before. But the one I want to highlight is a professor of mine from University of Michigan. His name's Richard Clouch, and he went on to Boise State to head the program there at Boise State. But when I was studying under him in Michigan, I was doing one of my first main stage plays. I had already been to Uta Hagen, and I sort of had this idea about how I wanted to approach the work. And um, I was very passionate, but also very young and very nervous about it and all that. And it shows you the importance of like even just sort of a throwaway line from somebody like that. He was somebody I looked up to, Richard. He was very passionate about the work and and he just after it was after rehearsal or after a performance one day, he said, I think if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to find your way in this business. I think you've got a future. in it,
Mm,
you know? For me, that was a massive, massive moment. You
mm,
know, it was like that kind of validation from somebody you respect. Richard probably didn't realize it, and maybe I shouldn't have put that much emphasis on it, but you need those moments. You know, you need those moments from your mentors, from people who you respect, who are doing the work, that notice you and say, "You're good. Keep going." You know, it's what helps you keep going because we all have those dark nights of the soul where you just wonder why, you know, after a while, and you have to remember those little nuggets that have propelled you forward.
yeah. And I'm curious, sort of looking, so I'm a huge fan of The Flash,
Uh-huh.
and some of the many roles that I've seen you in over the years. And I'm curious, with having played so many sort of sinister characters and villains, was there a point in your
Yeah.
career that you were just like, keep them coming, or was there a point that you were like, can I just play a likable, nice guy, sort of a
Uh,
dad, a normal, or was it really the villains that you're just like, no, let me sink my teeth into these guys because they're often more fun to play than the hero, I feel.
yeah. Yeah, I never really, I don't remember having a moment where I'm thinking I'm doing too many bad guys. And in fact, early on, I had more than my fair share of the good guys too.
Mhm,
They're just not as memorable as the bad guys, you know? And it was sort of funny because when I first came out, I was definitely cast a lot as like the kind of dim, naive kid from the Midwest who,
mhm,
you know, doesn't know about these big city ways. And then you had something like that juxtaposed with like something I did in The Mask of Zorro, which was this absolute sociopathic villain, you know.
mhm. One of my
And
favorite movies.
it's really it still works, still holds up. And to be jumping back and forth from those two camps kind of as an actor was actually really great. I loved it, you know. And I was doing sitcoms and movies and theater, and I loved the unpredictability of my early career.
Mhm,
And then as things went on and people got used to you, you know, you started to settle into certain types, I guess. But I just wanted to work. I never worried about, you know, good guy, bad guy, anything like that. I wanted to work with people I respect who felt the same way about it that I do, and you know, I've really been able to do that by and large.
And with the many sort of genres you've gotten to do and whatnot, again, you said a TV, film, theater, sitcoms and dramas, science fiction,
Mhm.
superheroes, all that stuff. Is there anything you haven't done yet that you're like hoping to sort of find its way over to you, like a really good like horror movie or another period piece maybe because it's been sort of a while since you've done a period. Uh,
Yeah, a really good horror movie would be super fun. I've never ever dipped my toe in that genre, so Jordan Peele or Ryan Coogler, if you're listening, I wouldn't mind an opportunity. That sounds super fun. That's a great idea. I also wanted, because these are so, it feels like these are so rare nowadays. Um, I think of a movie like, you know, Tender Mercies with Robert Duvall, you know,
mhm.
about this country, like something simple, something about just a relationship or a family or, you know, like in the bedroom or something like that. It it just feels like we're seeing those sort of low to mid-budget movies with simple stories slip away. And I'd love to just be playing more in that pool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer because, as much as I love, again, the science fiction and the comic book movies and whatnot, and it's, yeah, there's way less sort of those character-driven dramas, like you said, and even
Yeah.
things like rom-coms are so rare these days. I grew up in the 90s. I grew up watching all that stuff. So now it's like, wait, where are the good rom-coms that made careers? Those made young stars out of people, and I feel like it's so rare now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And now any rom-com that comes out, I mean, one of the storylines, one of the PR angles is always going to be they're going to save the rom-com with this rom-com. And it's, you know, all this weird pressure that it doesn't need. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I think people have an appetite for those stories still. And, you
For
know,
sure.
maybe they're just not coming from the, you know, the standard studio system. Maybe we need to see them come from other places. But
Yeah. I'm not sure if you've watched the show The Studio, but I actually just started watching it and poking fun at the industry for that reason, being like, we need to make another Barbie, $1 billion, whatever. And it's like,
yes.
well, that was an accident. They weren't trying to make $1 billion movie.
Yeah, what's the thing that they're it's
The Kool-Aid movie.
Kool-Aid. That's right. The Scorsese. Hilarious.
Yeah.
And really not far from the truth,
Yeah,
really not at
absolutely.
all far from the truth.
Right. And there's Minecraft, another huge hit, and
Mhm.
the Minecraft movie, and which I've heard
Yeah.
is great. I haven't seen it yet, but it's just sort of like, wait, where? But again, you could make 50 low budget, you know, movies
Yeah.
for the budget of one of those, but uh,
Yeah. No, it's a tricky time to say the
yeah,
least. I think a lot of things are going to shake out here very rapidly in the next 5 to 10 years that are going to change everything about the movie making business even more.
yeah.
So we'll see.
Hopefully for the better. I hope that movies like
Yeah.
Sinners and whatnot sort of change what folks want to do, because that movie was fantastic. You brought up Brian Coogler
Yeah. Yeah.
before, but just sort of seeing it's not a crazy high budget. It was 90 million, which is crazy to say. That's not that much.
I know, right?
90 million.
I know.
But it's very different for what the story was. It was a fresh take. It was, very
Yeah.
grounded. It wasn't sort of a 90-minute slasher
Yeah.
movie. It was, you know,
Yeah,
such a great
no,
movie.
it's a brilliant movie.
Yeah.
And I think what you're seeing is, I think we're still seeing some post-pandemic fallout from all this, post-strike fallout,
Yeah.
and then just, the advance of technology fallout and everything that's happening with AI and how it's going to
Yeah.
contribute or detract from the industry. And it's going to take time for that to shake out and see where it settles. I'm optimistic because I prefer to be optimistic,
Mm.
about the future of the business, but it's going to take time.
Yeah. You have recurring roles, not one but two, a different series. We have NBC's Suits LA and CBS's Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage. Two very different shows. Again, sort of a
Hmm.
traditional sitcom that's in the world of The Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon and all of that.
Hmm.
And then you
Yeah.
have Suits LA, which sort of it's so weird to say. It's sort of like an old school procedural because they don't really make new procedurals so much anymore. And mind you, it's not really a procedural. Suits wasn't so much that, but I feel like even that sort of genre of like legal drama, police procedural is, they're not making too many new ones of those anymore either. It's
Yeah, or the ones they're making are very sort of dry and bare bones. They don't tend to be character driven. They tend to be kind of ripped from the headlines kind of stuff. And Suits is trying to do something different. I mean, it really is trying to introduce that, LA law Suits kind of
yeah,
show back into the mainstream. It's for me, between those two shows, those are kind of like it's almost like the two halves of my career that I was sort of referring to earlier, to be doing a multicam sitcom in front of a live audience, which does not happen. When I first moved to LA 30 some years ago, that was still a very, there were many examples of that on the air, not so much anymore. But it's really kind of my favorite medium in a way because you get to basically do a little play every week.
mm,
You rehearse, you rewrite, you run through, you set cameras, you bring in an audience, they respond. All that's really gratifying. But to go from something like that to something like Suits LA, which is, a big budget, high powered, procedural drama, lawyer drama, it's kind of like for Georgie and Mandy is how I spent the first part of my career, and Suits is how I spent the second part of my career. Lots of you talk about bad guys. Like I love the Captain Love and Reverse Flash kind of bad guys
mm,
because those are just so obvious, and they don't have to have any conscience about it whatsoever. But to play that, a-hole in a suit, whether it's a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, that can wear on you after a while. But but anyway, I'm grateful for both of them, and I love the fact that I'm going back and forth between two very different genres, very different tones, very different parts. So especially in this time where things have slowed down, very grateful to have that much going on.
And
Yeah.
with Suits, you have this sort of Arrowverse reunion with Stephen Amell
Yeah.
playing his father. Um, what's that dynamic been like? These two always sort of at odds with each other, a lot of resentment stewing underneath, not much sort of love lost
Yeah.
between all of that.
It's sort of some of your I would say classic daddy issues, but there's a murder, behind it all somewhere. Somebody dies, and so, it sort of goes a step beyond that.
Mhm.
That's going to be resolved in the next few episodes. But yeah, I like it, and I've really enjoyed working with Steven. I never got a chance to work with him on The Flash or
Right.
Legends of Tomorrow, any of that stuff. And so getting to know him a little bit has been really fun. He's really, poured himself into this part and is making he's the one carrying us for sure.
Mhm.
So most of my stuff is just with him. I'll come on set and we're in a room or we're in an office or a hallway or something like that, and
Mhm.
it's you know dad and son going at it. The thing that made me nervous, of course, early on was like, well, I'm not that much older than Steven. This is sort of a, and so there was some work done during the pilot to try and, make me appear a little older. And then as production was approaching, I called Aaron Korsh, the executive producer, and I said, is there anything you want me to do to try and age myself up a little bit, grow a beard? He's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, we're going to do all that in post. We're going to put all the, we're going to age you up about 10 years in post. It's great.
Oh, really?
Don't worry. I've seen it. Yeah. So that's what they've done for the show. And I was like, that's incredible. A, it's incredible that I got to keep the job at all because why not just get an older guy to do it?
Mm.
But B, it's like that you could just do that by snapping your fingers now, and
Yeah.
you've got the guy you want playing the part just 10 years older. Um, Incredible,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. And given this reunion, are there any other actors that you have worked with before that you're just dying to do something else with?
Oh, geez. Are there any other? I mean, yeah, there's a million of them. I mean, I've worked with some people who I think are among the best actors working now. I'd always worked with Jeff Daniels again. I did a movie called Her with Amy Adams and Joaquin Phoenix, who are, two of our best actors. I would, kill to work with those two again. Um, yeah, I would have loved, I wish the Zorro series had sort of become a thing for Antonio. I wish he had made that. It feels like he could have made three or four of those movies. And he's just so perfect for the part. I would have loved to go back and do something with him again because he's a delight, just a total gentleman, a hard worker, and really a lovely man. So yeah, those are a few names for sure that I wouldn't mind seeing again.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to meet Antonio a couple years ago. I think a couple years, I think it was before COVID, so several years ago.
Yeah.
At the Critics' Choice Awards, he was nominated
Mm.
for playing Picasso
Hmm.
in Genius,
Yeah.
and yeah, he was just such a sweet guy and very very kind. And I had to tell him he was one of the few, especially in the '90s, he was one of the few Hispanic actors as a leading man. So I
Yeah.
was like, I looked up to him since I was a kid. I didn't see that many folks who were his age. It was always, there was Jimmy Smits, who was a bit older, and Edward James
Mhm.
Olmos and folks. But yeah, he is such a role model for me. He's such a, like you said, kind and very hardworking, and yeah, just
A great guy, and not afraid to get his hands dirty whatsoever.
mm,
And for somebody like me, that was my first big, studio picture. And I had a pretty good role, and then we had tons of fighting in it, tons of
yeah,
swordplay. And he always did all of it with me. We rehearsed together all the time. He was not afraid to, give me as much of his time as I needed in order to feel comfortable with that.
mm,
And he was just good at everything he did. I mean, just one of those really light souls who just walks into a room and kind of, makes everything brighter. I guess that's what a star is.
we have our what we call our sort of $1 million question because it's the
Okay.
most asked question on Reddit and Facebook actor groups and all of that. And it's always young actors trying to get the ball rolling in their career
Mm.
post college or post conservatory. They're like, how do I get my first rep? Because I can
Hmm.
only submit myself on Actors Access. I can only go to open calls so many times.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for an actor who is sort of like fresh out of school and they're just like aching to work and to get the ball rolling, maybe for anyone who feels a little stuck at that point.
Yeah. I would say you have to do everything you can to build as wide a foundation as you can beneath
Mm,
yourself. Because there's, like you said, there's only so many ways you can directly approach representatives. So what you, I think, need to put your attention and focus on is A, getting better at what you do, and B, finding other people who are trying to do the same thing that you're doing. So I think it might be easy for an actor who is new to the business and wants to make that big jump into getting a representative and working in TV and film, whatever it is they see for themselves, it might be easy for them to turn up their nose at that play that's being done at a 20-seat theater downtown, and you're begging your friends to come and see it. But what you're doing by doing that play is you're going to the gym, you're giving yourself a place to work out and try things. You're also meeting and working with people who are in the same place that you are or have been in the same place that you have been not that long ago. You're building your community, and it's through word of mouth in that community that things spread. Like someone comes to see you in that play downtown that happens to represent one of the other actors and likes something you did and wants you to, just audition for this other thing. Little connections like that sort of spider web out and develop into a career. The question is, how long do you want to wait for it? How long do you feel like you can wait for it? And that's something that only you can answer.
mm,
Um, and it's the thing that I guess sort of separates the pros from the amateurs. Now, it's easy for me to say that because, like I said, I got a couple of really nice breaks early on that sort of gave me a segue right into the industry. Um, but I really do believe now that those can happen for anybody at
mm,
any given point in time. I would say like the third part of that sort of establishing your foundation, because it's so common now and you should do it if you feel so motivated to do it, is really to create your own work, whether that's producing your own play, writing something, making your own movie, making videos, what you're doing here with this. I mean, this isn't maybe serving your primary focus as an actor, but I'm sure you're gleaning things from this or picking
oh,
up
for
things
sure.
along the way that are serving you well.
Yeah.
Um, Engaging in the process, putting yourself out in the world, putting your voice out in the world is really important. It helps you to develop sort of a thicker skin from all the slings and arrows that are going to be coming your way, and then it will remind you at some point. You never know how this is going to work out. You never know how anything's going to work out. You just have to start. You have to take a step. You have to
Yeah.
put it out there. And it doesn't happen the first time, second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, maybe the sixth time. But unless you put it out there, nobody's going to know you're there. So, yeah, build community, work as much as you can, and create your own work as much as you can. And all that over time, I think you'll find it'll pay you dividends, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. That build community for me, I think, is one of the most important ones, especially for actors who are moving far away. If they're moved to a market nowhere near their friends or
Uh-huh.
their family or anything. I'm lucky. I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm an hour on the train from New York.
Mhm.
But for other folks like yourself, you had to move halfway across the country, and it's like, how do you build a
I
community from scratch? And it's tough, but it's so necessary, whether it's with folks at an acting class or coworkers or just something.
mhm.
Now online, it's
I
a lot easier, but
Yeah, no. I packed up my Honda Civic and drove from Michigan to LA, and I knew like three people in town.
yeah.
And within the first few months, I got an offer from a friend of a friend from college who said, "Hey, I'm doing this production of Richard III above a bookstore in Westwood. Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Hell yeah, I want to work. I want to do something." And I'm playing like six different parts, and
Mhm.
everybody's playing six different parts, and we're all dressed in black. And if it's a scene on the ocean, then there's a blue sheet behind us, and if it's a scene, it's stuff like that. One night we played for one person above that garage, an audience of one. Nobody came and saw it. It was not a
Uh,
good show, but I made connections there that I swear have lasted till this day.
Mm,
And I wouldn't have predicted it then, but that's the whole point. You can't predict it. You
yeah.
just have to go with it.
And before we wrap up, we always end with a game. So
Okay.
choose a number, one, two, or three, and that determines the game we play.
Three.
Alrighty. Three is it's called For the First Time, a game of life and career firsts.
Hmm.
So what is the first film you remember seeing in theaters?
The first film I remember seeing in theaters was The Empire Strikes Back. I went and saw it an
Solid.
early sh we were going to go with the whole family, and my I went with my dad to go buy tickets at the theater. And while we were there, he said, maybe we should just pop in and see it right now. And so without my brothers and my mom there, we bought tickets, we went in and saw it. And then we went back and saw it again later that day. But yeah, that blew me away. I remember just being like, this is the coolest thing I've ever
Yeah.
seen in my life.
And did you manage to keep the big spoiler from the rest of your family?
Probably not. I'm sure I was a little jerk holding it over my brothers' heads. But yeah, nobody's complained about it, recently,
Yeah.
so I'm sure it was okay.
What was your first non-acting job?
My first non-acting job was working for my dad. Yeah, I would work for my dad. He had a construction company, and I would, in high school and before that, I would work for him on weekends, like sweeping up and stuff like that.
Mm,
And I did that for, geez, 5 summers before I branched out and did something else.
yeah.
So, yeah, but it was a good gig.
Yeah. Who is the first person that you call when you book a job?
My wife,
Mm.
I've got a family. And so the first thing I think of when I book a job is, okay, now we have to plan for this. My kids are old enough that, I don't have to worry about them anymore. But yeah, I've always got to clear it with the tower, as I say.
With the tower. What was your first flight to?
My first flight was to San Diego from Michigan. My grandparents lived in San Diego.
Mm.
And I flew out there with my mom and my brothers to visit them. Yeah, I had not been on a plane before that, and it was like going to Mars. It was like I remember being on the beach in La Jolla, and going to Disneyland, and all these incredible things. And I was like, wow, people live this way all the time. They live near an ocean. It's incredible. But yeah, that was the first flight.
What was the first time you saw yourself on TV?
Uh, I it was my very first episodic thing I ever did, which was Saved by the Bell, the college years. So
Oh
they
yeah, yeah.
they went they went from daytime TV to prime time for a season, and I played a fraternity president who, wanted to admit Zach, but
Mhm.
didn't want to admit his buddies. So, it was my first bad guy, I guess, right
Mm.
there.
That's
Yeah.
when I'll start. I'll start it.
That's where it all started. Rick Larson. My brothers still like to bring up Rick Larson, the role. They call me the Ricker sometimes.
And what was the first time that you were ever starstruck?
Mask of Zorro. I mean, I was a little bit starstruck with Jeff, but he's very unassuming. But getting the Mask of Zorro was a very difficult process. It took a couple of months, and then I thought I didn't have it. And then I got a call one night saying, "Guess what? The actor they thought they had for it has dropped out. You need to pack your bag and get on a plane and be in Mexico by 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. You're going to be
Jesus.
there for 6 months." So I went from being unemployed to working in Mexico for 6 months. I got on a plane, I got off the plane, I checked in, I dropped my bags, and I went straight to a table read to sit
Wow.
next to Anthony Hopkins
Wow.
and read the script for the Mask of Zorro. And that Anthony Hopkins is like on my Mount Rushmore of,
Yeah.
this is how it should be done kind of actors. So I was legit starstruck when
Yeah.
I sat next to him. Lovely
Wow.
man, another
Yeah.
lovely man.
And lastly, we always end every interview with this question. In 10 words or less, what advice would you give to a young actor?
Don't be afraid to look foolish.
Love that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's such a pleasure chatting with you. If anyone wants to give you a follow anywhere on social, where can they find you?
Instagram at real Matt Letscher and Matt Letscher on Facebook.
Thanks for joining us. Actors with Issues is hosted and produced by Juan Ayala. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe to our YouTube channel or on the podcast platform you're listening to. Visit actorswithissues.com for exclusive news and reviews, and give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok at Actors with Issues.